A game reportedly 25 years in the making. The space game, or as we know it, Starfield, is Bethesda's new universe, and their first since the late 90s. Bethesda have spoken openly about how this game was their dream, and despite all the brilliant RPGs set on one planet, their goal has always been to open it up to the adventures of space. In theory, this creates endless possibilities, and with games like Fallout 3 and Skyrim in their locker, fans have always longed for the potential for this game to be Bethesda's best one yet. At one point in time, Bethesda were the outright leaders in the RPG market, with said games in the Fallout and Elder Scrolls franchise growing in popularity with each release. They contain some of the best mechanics on the market, whilst having enticing worlds that were handcrafted, leading to hours of exploration and amusing encounters. Add to this some gripping storylines, and it's clear to see why people truly believed any new universe that Bethesda got their hands on would turn out to be incredible. But these same views fans had about Bethesda during the early 2010s have continued to decline year after year over the last decade, until they reached an all-time low as recently as 2018. From having no Elder Scrolls games since 2011, to the mixed reception of Fallout 4, it was a tough start to the decade for Bethesda. But once the release of Fallout 76 happened, it seemed all the issues with the company began to flow out, and there was absolutely no stopping it. False promises, lies and deception, thought some, whilst others focused on the game itself and the bugs and glitches that ravaged it. I couldn't tell whether people were laughing more at the poor storyline or the engine that was on its last legs. What was obvious to everyone though, was Bethesda needed some change, and with their next release, they needed to come back with a bang. It was in that same year of 2018 where Starfield was first announced. The hype train certainly wasn't great as it could have been, given Bethesda's track record, but it had people slightly optimistic about the future. It wouldn't be until another 5 years until we would finally see what Starfield truly is. As the game got revealed more and more, many people, including myself, thought this game looked too good to be true. I mean, surely it couldn't have over 1,000 planets, and still have that detailed feel of Bethesda's RPGs. Well, it's been a couple months since Starfield came out, and after finally finishing this game, it's time I gave it a review. So grab some popcorn as we look at Starfield, Bethesda's flawed masterpiece. So let's begin with the wider story told in Starfield. The game follows you, a nobody on the planet of Vectera, who after coming in contact with a mysterious object, is now tasked to meet a group on New Atlantis. Constellation as they are known, tell us of these artifacts, and after we've collected a couple early on, we can see they are coming together to make something greater. Without going into too much detail here, that's what the majority of the main story entails, finding out about different artifacts and hunting them down. However, that's not to say the mission design is boring, as it actually gets pretty creative. A mission I distinctly remember early on was travelling to Neon to help secure an artifact in an arms deal of sorts. We meet Walter Stroud, who leads us into the meeting, and from there we can either help smooth over the deal or use some brute force to ensure we get that artifact. I really did enjoy this mission from start to finish. I mean, the city of Neon really acts as the perfect backdrop for this deal. It's this beautiful neon lit city that hides a criminal underworld, and it really helps reinforce the idea of this deal not being safe and the people who we are dealing with being a danger. The other mission I want to talk about is probably the most creative in the game. However, it does take a page out of Titanfall 2's book. If you've played that game, you'll know of the iconic time travel level, and towards the latter stage of Starfield, we come across a very similar mission. Tasked with finding an artifact below a lab, we can observe it's taking some strange effects on the building, causing it to open up to another reality. Once we receive a certain device, we're able to switch between them, to either get past barriers that aren't there, fight a different type of enemy, or finally choose which reality to save. Whilst clear inspiration has been taken from Titanfall, I still think this mission is unique enough, and it makes sense in terms of the story. You might be wondering throughout this, who is our main enemy? And I guess this is probably the point where I should warn you that now I'll be introducing some spoilers, so skip to the time below to skip to the gameplay section. Right, you're still here. So the main enemy of Starfield isn't the spaces or creatures you fight on each planet, but instead an alien group, who we meet midway through the game, named the Starborn. The Starborn claim they know everything about the universe, and they do everything in their power to try and take the artifacts from us. they attack us on multiple occasions, even taking the fight to New Atlantis. We are then given the option to go help Sam Coe or to defend the artifacts of Barrett. Whoever we choose here is incidentally the one we save, and sadly for me, I lost Sam Coe. Or did I? Now this is the big twist in Starfield that will really mess with your head. Eventually, we're invited upon the Scorpius ship to meet the Hunter and the Emissary of the Starborn. This is until the Emissary removes their mask and Sam Coe is underneath. At this point I was concerned at a fake out, but the artifacts are then revealed as a key to an infinite universe. Yes, that's right, Bethesda went there. They actually tackled the idea of multiple universes, and somewhat did it well. That's how Sam Coe is here again, and we suddenly realise that this loop happens in every universe, as the Starborn are the ones who open up the gateway and are therefore in a loop where they do it every time. Such a cool concept for a game of story I thought would be so basic. After either siding with the Starborn or going against them, we eventually open up the key to the multiverse, and can enter another universe, thus being the first game where New Game Plus actually makes sense in the boundaries of the story. The main story here is very strong, and it goes to places I didn't think it would go to, but that's not all. There are plenty of factions and companions with their own stories that will take you all across the galaxy. I chose the downright badass 3-star Rangers faction, and I can assure you that the missions and rewards at the end are worth the effort. A far fetch from both the mythical lands of Elder Scrolls and the post-apocalyptic Fallout, Starfield was bound to feel different in the gameplay department. This is everything from the combat to the travel, and ways you get from mission to mission. Let's start with the travel, as it's perhaps the biggest change from the Bethesda formula. Whilst Fallout lets you walk and run, and Skyrim lets you have a horse, Starfield says, here, have a spaceship. Obviously this is necessary for a space game, but how do the ship and planets affect the gameplay? Well, from a mission to mission basis, the game doesn't feel as open as their previous titles, which is strange given the scale of the game. Each planet will have a couple of key areas in which missions take place, where you can fly your ship to, have a key hub area where you can find vendors or side missions, or for the more obscure planets, you tend to find nothing but a few small areas, such as an abandoned facility, either for a side mission, or as a way to gain some additional loot. That's not to say there isn't anything in between, as there are smaller points of interest to keep you interested, and materials that are used for crafting later on in the game. This is perhaps where Starfield steers the furthest away from Bethesda's previous work, but it's not all bad. The gameplay experience intended here is for you to dot around on these planets, to do main missions, side missions, and collect resources. There's enough variety in the designs of these worlds that keep the player engaged, and the missions don't drag out too much on one planet to where it becomes stale. The combat I can definitely say is flawed. Janky is probably the best word to use here, but that doesn't cover everything. Some of the combat abilities are really cool, and they do make you feel powerful, akin to maybe the Dragonborn abilities from Skyrim, but it's the gunplay where everything changes. To be fair, there is a wide selection of weapons, and there's good customization with the workbench involved. However, everything from the clunky aiming, or the frustrating and boring enemy AI, makes combat feel really off at times, and certainly takes away from the immersion a little bit. It's a real far cry from the more slow and tactical combat system of Fallout, and the melee combat is miles behind the up close and personal gritty combat in a game like Skyrim, which came out 12 years before. It truly is a shame, as I was hoping they could try and combine elements of both, whilst obviously introducing their own mechanics to create the best combat system yet, but instead it feels like an area of the game pushed to the wayside, and has taken a step back rather than a step forward. This does take away massively from the gameplay experience, as like most RPGs, combat does make up for a lot of the gameplay. Space battles or ship combat on the other hand is awesome. Each pre-built ship comes with different weapons. These can range from laser cannons, missiles, and flying around in an A-class ship makes you feel so powerful. There are different vendors that can sell you really cool ships, ones that you can earn from missions, or the game even lets you craft your own ship. The combinations here are endless, and the game really allows you to make your own ship feel like a home, away from all the chaos taking place outside of it. Creatively, this is where Starfield thrives. Along with the crew and base building mechanics that I'll get onto later, this is where I can see the main replayability being for me, as it's so enjoyable to find that spaceship that really feels like your own, and then you can go on all these adventures in. Back to the ground combat though, and I would say the AI for sure is the worst part about Starfield, with the enemies mostly standing still and just shooting back. There isn't much variety in their design, and their tactics make it quite trivial. This also takes away from some of the combat tactics you might have used if they provided somewhat of a challenge. The core gameplay of Starfield is decent, but it's unspectacular compared to its older counterparts. Getting from mission to mission in your starship can be fun, but there's little in between. The gunplay is pretty smooth and the abilities are fun and outlandish, but it's held back by some really poor AI that needs some serious work. Space combat and ship creation, on the other hand, is incredible, and is something that they nailed first time, which I wasn't expecting. For me, the gameplay is a step back for Bethesda, but it still manages to be serviceable. It's time we talk about those mechanics that make this game not just any old game, but an RPG. The skill tree is a particular standout area for me. It really pushes for creativity and allows you to aim for a particular build, whether that's combat based or science based like I chose. Every point you spend feels impactful and each decision is important, with there always being another choice that's just as good out there. The introduction of completing challenges to upgrade the next tier of your skill is a great addition, and adds to that feeling of building up your character to a certain type of playstyle. Some of them could take a while, but the benefits are worth it. And by about the mid-game, if you spend the skill points effectively, you could have huge advantages. Base building is another key pillar of RPG games, and in Starfield, it's another area that's seen huge improvements. The introduction of the top-down camera allows you to craft the exterior, whilst the classic first-person camera allows you to handcraft some of the interior details. There are so many options for design, and with the research bench allowing you to discover more things tied to your base, the possibilities here are endless. Every good RPG game has some good companions to accompany you on your journey, and Starfield is no different. From space cowboy Sam Coe, who's coming to grips with his past, to the avid adventurer Barrett, there is someone for everyone to travel with. These companions are really dynamic, and each of them reacts differently to different people, different missions, and different outcomes in the story. It really makes choosing the right companion that much more important, as they can really complement you in both combat and the choices you make in the world. Speaking of companions, there's a new innovation with Starfield, and that's having a crew. I talked earlier about having that starship that really feels like your own, and more recently about the bases that you can craft. And once you reach a certain stage in the game, you can hire new members for both. Go into any settlement and find a bar, and there'll be countless people you can hire. They all specialise in different things, and whilst they aren't the deepest characters like the main companions, they all have their own charms. They'll greet you as you board your ship, and they'll be there to help you with your base. I absolutely love this aspect of the game, and much like the ship creation and base building, it's this creative area of Starfield that makes it so much more replayable, that makes it feel like an RPG, and most importantly, makes it feel like a huge upgrade, as this is some of the best customization and freedom I've seen. In fact, I would go as far as to say that all these RPG mechanics intertwine beautifully to create something truly special. The skill tree acts as the base for everything, allowing you to go off in all these different directions. And once you have a build you want to focus on, you can utilise different companions, base building and crew to your advantage. And it allows for some really varied and continual exciting gameplay. This is for certain Starfield's strength, and it gives it that Bethesda charm that I was worried it would be lacking. I've mentioned it a few times in this video, but it's really hard to talk about the world and level design of Starfield, as we're talking about 1,000 worlds. There are a number of planets that have cities or key areas, such as New Atlantis or Aquila City, and this is where the majority of the story or side missions are gained, handed in, where crew members are hired, or where items are bought and sold. All of that classic RPG stuff. Each of the key towns and cities are spectacular in their own right, with a city like Neon being this downtown neon-lit city with a criminal underworld, or Aquila City, which is this Wild West-inspired town home to the 3-star Ranger faction. I was extremely underwhelmed with New Atlantis, however. It looks stunning, and when you first arrive, it does feel like this expansive city that Bethesda mentioned in the trailers. But the more you return, the more you realise how enclosed the city is. It doesn't really feel like this expansive, interconnected city, but instead, something with disjointed parts and misused space where fast travel is essential. I would have liked to see it feel more connected to the planet it's on too, as it really feels like a bubble in the middle of nowhere, which seems like a little bit of a missed opportunity to me. There are some really cool places off to the side that you'll find in your travels though. Perhaps more than I first expected when going into Starfield. The Red Mile is this really exciting area that I stumbled upon whilst on a side mission, in which you enter a bar that hides a challenge. This challenge throws you out into the wilderness, with the goal of pressing a button on the other side. Seems quite simple, right? But with a long run there and back, and tough enemies in between, this is a tough but rewarding challenge. You might even spot the legendary Donovan Reese while there, who is one of my favourite characters in the game. He has this superstar status, as he's completed the gauntlet an outstanding 28 times, a true icon of the game. Other notable places I found on my travels were this old Earth museum on the moon of Titan, containing old NASA items and old sports memorabilia for Once Upon a Time on Earth. Speaking of Earth, and the solar system as a whole really, it's a shadow of its former glory. Once home to all humans, Earth now has, nothing left.
I've got nothing left! I've got nothing left!
It's a barren wasteland, aside from the secrets that I won't spoil, and it's quite a powerful experience going back here for the first time, and seeing what Earth could really be like in the real world if humans continue in the way we currently are. There are quite a few of these interesting landmarks to visit, and again, it's much like Fallout or Elder Scrolls, just on an unreal scale. This does mean that there is an unbelievable amount of empty space and mostly empty planets. In fact, most of them have nothing but resources, or the odd storyboard mission on them. Other than collecting resources, or doing said storyboard quest, you probably won't visit half these planets. So was it a poor decision for Bethesda to have this many planets? Well, yes and no. You see, it does hamper the performance of the game, which is at 30 FPS. On the Xbox Series X, this is a huge letdown, and it took some getting used to at the start. It also means that exploration can feel less impactful, as landing on the same type of planets with the same sort of landmarks and resources can really get a bit stale during the mid-game, as some of the random generation isn't that advanced. But what I will say is that firstly, I believe it adds to the experience in the sense that the game truly does feel endless. When you look at the star map and you see truly how many planets are in the game, it's quite awe-inspiring, which is very important in a space game. And secondly, for the gameplay experience as intended, I think it mostly works. Now I know it's an RPG, and the gameplay experience is really up to the player, so it can differ. But I don't think the intention is to stay on the randomly generated planets for too long. You might collect some resources, visit some settlements, or build a base, but the game is mostly pushing you towards these main planets with the cities, where the main quest and side quests take place. And these randomly generated planets are simply there to pad out the game and make it feel expansive. Overall, despite some of the drawbacks of the world design, or should I say universe design in Starfield, I do quite enjoy it. I love the idea of an expansive and open space which feels endless. And whilst I would have preferred less planets in favour of 60 FPS, I liked exploring, visiting landmarks and viewing some of the beautiful landscapes that Bethesda's crafted. It's not perfect, it's not handcrafted like Skyrim, where everything is built for purpose, but it's open and free, and for me, that works for Starfield. After years of hype and speculation, and months of worry and controversy before its release, did Starfield really live up to the expectation and become the masterpiece it set out to be? For its awe-inspiring worlds, great and industry-defining RPG mechanics, and fun quests and characters, in many ways it's the space game that I've always wanted. However, what changes Starfield from a masterpiece to a flawed one is perhaps Bethesda's ambition. Some of the things Bethesda want to be in this game just simply can't work to its full potential with current technology, particularly on consoles. Whilst I appreciate the efforts made by Bethesda, it's clear that this game has some obvious flaws in the performance and combat departments that do hold it back from reaching close to their best work, like a Skyrim or a Fallout 3. That being said, Starfield was a great game, and personally, one of my favourites this year. It comes with all the RPG mechanics we expect, and they have been refined and improved to be what I consider some of the best in the genre. Despite their problems, the planets can be thrilling from a visual standpoint and fun to explore, while certain ones hold cool areas with missions ready to grab and secrets ready to delve into. It's for these reasons why I give Starfield an 81 out of 100 score. It's so close to being one of the best games in the genre, like it's set out to be, and it's unfortunate that it can't quite reach them heights. The gameplay loop stayed fresh for me throughout my 50 hours of gameplay, and there is still so much replayability with the different choices, factions and base building in New Game Plus. I'm not sure whether Bethesda plans to expand on Starfield or whether it will be a one-off space game, but I do firmly believe they are close to perfecting the formula. Ask yourself this: what would Starfield have looked like in 10 or 20 years' time, where the improvement in technology would allow it to excel? Well, in the short term, I guess we can hope for some great DLC content and continue to get lost in the world they have created. Thank you for watching this video. If you are still here, if you wouldn't mind liking this video, it would be much appreciated, as this review has taken me months to fully put together, from playing and understanding the game to converting that into a review. But I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. And that's why Starfield is Bethesda's flawed masterpiece.